Cheers guys, Epix911, welcome to the Elitist Geek. Guess what I got? One guess? What have I been jonesing about for, well, pretty much my whole life, but especially hard the last few months? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. HTC Vive arrived on Monday. Guess where I've been? Exploring virtual worlds. When I would watch people talk about HTC Vive, it would always strike me that they didn't describe it in the way that I wanted them to frickin' describe it. You know? Give me a sense of what the experience is like. Only they couldn't. And now I know why. You can't relate, and that is probably going to be the single biggest marketing challenge for the Rift and the Vive guys, and hell, even Project Morpheus. And that's where I'm going to come back to, because I think Project Morpheus, of all three solutions, yes, it's the one that's delayed, right? Unless you ordered an Oculus Rift, which yes, I did too, and it's not coming till August, which is a whole other story. But let's touch on that super quick, and I'll get back to my previous point. I put the order in for the HTC Vive at the beginning of April. I got it at the beginning of May, basically within 30 days. I put an order in for the Oculus Rift at the same time. August was the expected delivery date. And apparently there's not that much of a discrepancy in sales between the two. A couple of million for the Vive and double that for the Rift. But you would think, having Facebook backing you, then again, they provide services, entertainment. They're not really used to physical goods supply chain, which, anyways, where I was going to go with that, and I'll touch on that too, is Project Morpheus has the best chance of mass market appeal, right? Of selling it to the mass market, which I firmly believe in turn is going to help these units sell. And we're going to get into the good, we're going to get into the bad of the unit, because I have literally been jonesing for it and all over it since it arrived. So the controllers, let's talk about that. So the controllers, you can see they've got wrist straps. Think TV remote meets Wii controller, right? With a circle contraption at the end, which are basically just sensors. Sensors that these pick up. And these laser eyes are probably the best part of the HTC Vive, because what they do is they provide body tracking in a virtual room. And that's what they actually call it. They call it virtual room. And I believe the maximum dimensions are 15 by 30 feet. I've done that in my man cave here, obviously not that large because the length of this room is 24 feet, but with the couch and everything else, I can't dedicate that much space. And it also doesn't work with rectangles. It works in squares. So if you assign a rectangle, right, which essentially I have here, I've got a rectangle that's probably 13 feet by 10 feet. Yeah, but well, let's say 13 by 9 feet, right? What it's doing is it's basically finding a square in there. So your end result is 9 by 9, not 9 by 13, right? And that's a little tricky at first. You got to conceptualize it. It works in squares. And what these sensors do is send out laser beams, and I'm going to show you. I should have had it ready, but that's okay. Let's take a look here. This is the face unit, all right? You can see the lenses are inside, right? I'd like to say I got a pretty normal face. I mean, I don't have a massive nose, but I don't have a super small nose. I've got a decent jaw, and yet for some reason there's a huge gap on this unit where my nose basically connects, right? So I've got to kind of tweak this a little bit once it's on my head. It is a heavier solution than the Rift, and I'll have a better idea when I actually get the Rift, right? But it's not a huge hassle. The biggest single challenge I've had is I generate a shit ton of body heat. This body generates heat like nobody's business, and my routine after work is to exercise. I lift weights and I do cardio. I've been doing that for the last 18 weeks, lost a bunch of weight, fantastic. The problem is my metabolism gets so jacked from that I'm sweating for hours afterwards. And even when I'm dabbing my head, this generates an ungodly amount of heat. So I've had to remove this about every 30 minutes, which so far has ruined the immersion at that end of that 30 minutes, right? I'm going to figure something out, maybe a desk fan, something that blows on my face. Maybe that gap is going to be advantageous in that I can circulate some air up there, right? There's a little bit of chromatic effect, which in the telescope industry, amateur astronomy is also one of my pastimes, we call chromatic aberration. And what that simply means is light doing wonky things on a lens. So those two lenses that I showed you inside, you get some halo effects, all right, in certain areas. It doesn't happen, or it doesn't tend to happen with the cartoony games. So all the games that it pretty much bundles with, right, the lab, job simulator, they don't exhibit that. I haven't come across that. Elite Dangerous, which is the whole reason I wanted VR, and we went into this on previous videos, VR is designed for cockpit games, mech games, flight games, driving games, and Elite is the granddaddy of them all, and it hasn't disappointed. But I have noticed flaring and chromatic aberration. You know, there's shimmering lights in places that there really shouldn't be in game. So the bad news is, while it's easy to set up, okay, I had everything set up within an hour, no problem, probably 30 minutes. The hard part is tweaking your system, getting your system to run just right. So I would say for the average person that doesn't have a lot of PC experience, say you're the type of person that went to the store, pointed and said, I want to make this work, build me a system. They are going to have a tough time, because just to give you an idea of what I've been through since Monday, okay? Repaired my Windows 10 install. Still continue to have driver issues. Did an SSD fresh install of Windows 10 is what I ended up having to do. Still worked. I mean, that worked, right? The last 4 drivers for AMD, since they went away from the Catalyst Control Center, have been, in my opinion, and I'm a Canadian, so I'm Team Red. Actually, I'm Team Green too. I'm both. I've always had SLI solutions, and I actually prefer SLI to Crossfire, but that's a topic for another video. But the last 4 post Catalyst Control Center drivers have been abysmal. Additional settings crashes. And I've tried literally every driver back to November, and they all crash on Radeon additional settings. I can work around it because I can use the game profiles to enable or disable Crossfire. So that's fine. But again, if you aren't very technical, and I'm an IT guy in my civilian life, you would know that stuff, and you would literally be stumping your head, because bending Elite Dangerous to my will to finally be able to frickin' play the game literally took me days. Last night, 9:30 to 10 p.m. was the first time all week, and it's Thursday tonight when I'm filming this, just to put it into perspective, that I've actually, so 2 days later, that I've actually been able to get some game time in. Let's talk about that. So enough complaints. Really, the heat generated and the setup time tweaks that you need to set up on your system, by far the most cumbersome, right, of the experience. Now the good stuff. At the beginning of the video, I talked about marketing, right? I can see that now. I had a concept. You got to remember, I'm a guy who's been pro VR. Since watching the holodeck on Star Trek The Next Generation, I dreamed this day would come. I dreamed it would start like this, and I dreamed it would get better, all right? It still doesn't even come close. Not even in the same spectrum of awesomeness when you actually put it on for the first time. People who say virtual reality is another fad, excuse my French, don't have a fucking clue, all right? It is so completely different, so paradigm-shiftingly different. You can't even put it into the same equation, all right? And I'm a guy who didn't buy the 3D hype. Sometimes I'll watch a 3D movie, didn't bother with the TV, didn't bother. I had a laptop that was enabled with 3D, barely used it. It was a fad. The only 3D I still use is on my Nintendo 3DS, and that's because they finally fixed it, right? The immersion that you feel being inside, and no videos really talk about this, and it's been driving me nuts on the internet because I wanted to know. And while I can't explain the majesty, I can tell you that there is majesty in the experience. And I know I look like a crazed psycho right now. I'm trying to talk to you into going in for a drive with me. But honestly, not the case. It's just so hard to frickin' explain. To market this, they need to be out there. They need to be in kiosks. They need to be in malls, schools, whatever it's going to take, old folks' homes, right? Disability centers. There is so much potential for VR. In fact, I would say gaming, which spawned it, very much in the same way that gaming drove the computer arms race, right? Gaming drove the console race. Gaming brought about the inception of VR, but I don't ultimately think gaming is what's going to make it successful. The VR experience for tourism, for putting people with disabilities in an environment where they can be mobile, right? For training. Like, the first thing I thought about when I played Gourmet Chef, which is a game where you basically, it's part of the job simulator package, right? And you're cooking stuff, orders come up, and you've got to cook, and you're in a virtual kitchen. You're opening fridges, stoves, toasters, you're operating blenders, you're putting water into a pot. Doesn't sound like a lot of fun, does it? It sounds kind of like work, but it is so much fun. But the first thought I had when I was playing that was, oh my God, the possibility for training is endless. Think about it. When these graphics get to the 4K per eye stage, there is absolutely no reason a car company like Honda, right, couldn't train their mechanics in VR. Sure, put them on a real car eventually, but they will be able to train in these environments. It's that freaking immersive. Let's go back to Elite Dangerous, the game that was the driving force for me. I always wanted VR, but it was a VR experience for a space RPG like Elite, or RPG Light, whatever the hell you want to call it, that drove me. And here, I'm going to show you guys. This, see if I can get it on the camera, is a Thrustmaster 4, PlayStation and PC compatible. You've just got to make sure you got the right firmware, right? It's the controller used, it's not the controller used in the game, but in your in-game avatar uses a flight stick on his right hand, or her hand, if you pick a female character, and a throttle on the left. Let me tell you about the immersion now. You can easily recenter your HUD display, right? So your orientation in your chair versus the game on your monitor. Just by hitting F12, it recenters it. Okay, that's an Elite Dangerous command, which is, you know, you're loading a lot of things. Sometimes you're losing a little bit of calibration. It's not bad, but that reset is critical, because what you can do, you can place the flight stick on your desk and the throttle in the exact same spot that your in-game avatar has them in his hands, right? In fact, you push forward on the throttle, your in-game avatar does. You completely buy the immersion when you're flying with a control set like this. If the virtual reality device itself is the most critical immersion piece, I would say this is probably second, because, and this is where, you know, the VR devices, their controls still don't work in all applications, right? But with a flight stick and throttle, otherwise known as a HOTAS, H-O-T-A-S, right? It's way, way immersive. So freaking amazing, right? So, I load the game up. I've done the tweaks, right? I've calibrated my joystick. I've mapped controls. I've also got a program called Voice Attack, all right? Conceivably, with one arm only on a flight stick, Elite Dangerous is so friendly to people with physical disability that, I mean, it's staggering, all right? So I play with the throttle and the joystick, right, the flight stick, and I've got all the other stuff tied to Voice Attack. And there's voice packs that are amazing online. Brent Spiner, William Shatner, my personal favorite, Midnight, Tom Baker. For anybody who doesn't know who Tom Baker is, all right, hand in your geek card now. Tom Baker is old school Doctor Who. He's my doctor. He's the doctor of many people in their late 30s and 40s. He was the fourth Doctor in the original series, and he has an awesome voice. Like, he's the kind of guy like Morgan Freeman, you could listen to him read a phone book, and it would be exciting, right? That combination, so the VR unit itself, the flight stick and throttle would be second, the third would be Voice Attack. Because having that computer and being able to ask your computer, tell me about the Orion Nebula, and the AI talks with you. Like, there's 1,200 to 1,500 commands and dialogue pieces. And this Voice Attack program that you run will basically macro those keystrokes, right? So if you say a typical thing for me, I don't bother mapping the landing gear to a button or worry about it on the keyboard, because as simple as saying deploy landing gear deployed, retract landing gear, you know, landing gear retracted. The computer AI will do it very quickly. I have a pretty neutral Canadian accent, and it was fine. It picked it up no problem. You know, there's been a couple of errors, but when it's more, I'm not using the right syntax combination, right, to prompt a response, rather than it misinterpreting what I'm saying. It's just, there's no dialogue for what I'm saying, right? So that's where I've been, guys. I'm going to show more about it. I just wanted to try to convey a little bit on what it's like, right? So you're sitting in the ship, you've got the Voice Attack, you're taking off from a space station for the first time. You look up, you feel the crushing emptiness of space. You feel the depth, the width, the majesty of the inside of the space station. When you see a freighter trekking half a kilometer overhead, casting a shadow over you as it goes, you feel the environment. You can look around inside your cockpit. With the Vive, you can walk around in your cockpit, right? About the only thing is, my fat ass, that broke the immersion for me, is looking at my on-screen avatar. The guy weighs maybe 130 pounds, soaking wet in his leather suit. I'm at 100 to that. So, kind of cool, you know, you look down, you see kind of this lean guy, but almost way too lean. It almost looks like gray alien lean, right? But fantastic, super immersive. I want to go play right now. Like, just talking about it, I'm excited. The only other issue is I have dropped 2D games. Not permanently. You guys know how addicted I am to Dark Souls, right? I beat every single game that they put out from Demon Soul on. Demon Soul, Dark Souls 1, 2, Bloodborne. I've stopped playing Dark Souls 3. Not because it's not a good game. It's an awesome game. But I've stopped playing simply for the fact that this is so much more fun right now for me. This gives me that dopamine release, and probably why I'm talking like this like a crazed maniac. It gives me the dopamine release that I used to have as a kid in the arcade, buying my first gaming system, right? That awesome dopamine adrenaline rush that I used to get playing video games that's been absent for, well, probably the last time I had it was World of Warcraft, and before that EverQuest, right? And before that RPGs like System Shock. So to have that feeling again, oh my God, it's been awesome. Like really, really awesome. The scale. There is an issue with the HTC Vive, apparently, all right? But I'm going to try the latest driver because apparently it fixes that. But it's kind of like the Starfield. Sorry, games have what's called a skybox, right? Think about Doom. Doom was a pseudo 3D game, really pseudo 2.25 if you want to be technical about it, right? And anytime you looked outside of the buildings in Doom to the horizon line, you would see a mountain range. That mountain range was just a static bitmap that showed you the border of the world, right? At 320 by 200 resolution on a CRT back then, it didn't do a lot to destroy your immersion, right? Your feeling of actually being there. Now you look back at it and you say, wow, that's super primitive. Now apparently with the HTC Vive, you can see the skybox, that's the stars and the galaxy in the background. I haven't noticed that. Yeah, but mind you, I've gone right to 16.3.2 Catalyst, right, or Radeon Cascade, I think it's called now. And apparently there were even more improvements with 16.4.2 hotfix. So that's what I'm going to install right when I finish this video. I haven't even done combat yet. Just docking, like going through the tutorials, learning how to dock and take off, were game changers. They were that, it was that amazing. If there's any way for me to convey it to you guys, it's the awe that you feel doing simple stuff. You don't pay attention to graphics in so many games anymore because they've all been cookie cutter, right? The Unreal Engine, remember that frickin' thing, Unreal 3? That thing lived on for like 10 years. You got used to a certain way models looked, right? A certain draw distance for your open world or game world. You start noticing things again in VR. You become a gawker. It's like people watching in Amsterdam or Paris, sitting in your cockpit just being a virtual tourist, right? It's that immersive. Mundane becomes fun. Cooking in a job simulator or an office simulator, God forbid, is fun. So I can't wait for things like adventure games. I think it's going to bring about a renaissance, a renewal, a resurgence, if you will, in adventure games. Stuff like King's Quest, right? But maybe more in a first-person view is ideal for adventure, for virtual reality. Having a static environment that you can interact with, you know, using the VR space is just going to be amazing. And, oh my God, that just made me think, imagine Gabriel Knight in VR. Wow. Anyways, there you have it, guys. As always, I assure you, not crazy, but I am crazy in love. And we'll go back to my baby. As always, cheers, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.